And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes, brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud sponsor of the Bonds, Loans and ESG Africa 2025 conference from the 25th to the 26th of March at the Cape Town International Convention Centre. Well, as The Money Show goes to air tonight, kind of three developing stories, really. First, the gold price hit just over $3,080 again. Just 2 weeks ago, it went over $3,000 for the first time. May well hit $3,100 as early as tonight. All of that really, I suppose, primarily because of the tariffs that are being imposed by the Trump administration in the US. Then news just as we go to air now, in fact, around the coalition. We'll have more on that in just a moment. And the fact, still no agreement between the ANC and the DA on a budget. That vote is next week in Parliament. I think there are all sorts of implications on that. We'll hear from Carol Payton on that in just a moment. And then the other big story today, Gerrie Fourie, the CEO at Capitec, retiring the age of just 61. He has played, I think there can be no doubt about this, an enormous role in the development of Capitec and therefore perhaps in banking in South Africa. There's going to be a lot of discussion around the role, the legacy. It's really going to be around the Capitec story as well. Your views tonight, 011 883 0702 021 446 0567, and of course voice notes this evening on 072 702 1702.
702. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
You heard the story in EWN, the ANC saying no deal has yet been reached on the budget. The Secretary General, Fikile Mbalula, confirming this afternoon that there still is no deal. Meanwhile, a report in News 24 in which the DA seems to be suggesting it can't find an agreement with the ANC. Several sticking points, I think, partly politically about who controls what in the economy, partly the 0.5 percentage point VAT increase proposed by the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana. Carol Payton's editor-at-large at Business 24. She's one of the authors of a report that's just gone live now. Carol, good evening to you. So Fikile Mbalula says there's no deal. What is the DA side telling you? They seem to be at the end of their patience.
Well, what happened was the DA over the past week, it had already broadened its demands, and they were not just talking about the budget. And then this week they said, what we actually need is we need some sort of shared control over the economy, and that the ANC is kind of continually making mistakes in the economy. The economy isn't growing, and we want greater influence. And that was what they put forward to the ANC earlier this week. And today the ANC came back to them and said, no go. We're not going to do that. We're not going to renegotiate the GNU at this stage. So the DA says, let's say the DA negotiators say, this means there's no deal. And if this means no deal, and the ANC goes and finds other people, other parties to support the budget and vote it through Parliament, then the GNU will end as we know it.
I mean, it's an incredible moment, this, because the DA kind of, in a way, wanted to be a part of the coalition. I realize what was said on the campaign trail. But it would be a big move to leave the coalition over this. And yet I also know in politics, control over economic policy is kind of the point of politics.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard to accept in a way that the GNU could end, because I think we're also enthusiastic about it and we want it to work. So it's hard to accept that, and it's hard to see that it would really go down, over something like this. But I think the DA is raising what they see to be a fundamental point. When the GNU was formed, on that day, or on the day that the president was voted in, and the parties signed that statement of intent, which they nearly didn't sign, sort of 5 minutes before the election of the president, there was no time to negotiate a coalition agreement. And so there isn't really a coalition agreement between the ANC and the DA, and that's part of the problem. The DA is saying, we're getting a raw deal, and the ANC are kind of like, we didn't promise you anything other than, what your positions in cabinet. So it is a difficult moment.
I suppose for the ANC, they would say, why would you go from you don't want a VAT increase to now wanting more control over economic policy? They'll see that as an extension of the DA's demands. For the DA, it has to show its constituency it's actually able to have an impact.
Well, I think so, and I think the ANC is feeling, this is unreasonable. This is ridiculous. This is crazy, because you've completely shifted the goalposts now. And I think the DA is saying to themselves, well, we've been in the GNU for 8-9 months, and things are not looking good. The economy is not looking good, and the ANC keeps on doing things which we disagree with when it comes to the economy, and we want a greater say. And if there's no point in us being in the GNU if we can't actually move the needle on growth and growth and jobs. So that's kind of where it's at.
What does the ANC do next? Do they go to the EFF? I mean, that might seem short-sighted in some ways. The EFF is probably weaker now than it's been in a long time. It would sort of rejuvenate the EFF in some ways.
I don't know what they'll do. I'm still holding out that there's going to be an ANC-DA deal. We kind of all know that that's the best thing for the country. But, they could go to the EFF, or they could conceivably get it through Parliament without either the EFF or the DA by, getting together enough votes on the day using the little parties, the really little, Action SA and the little parties. But that would then mean that they've got a very unstable coalition, because it would effectively end the GNU as well.
Carol Payton, thank you very much indeed. Editor-at-large at Business 24, the latest on the National Coalition on The Money Show tonight.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes.
The G20 Working Group has just finished in Durban, obviously as part of our hosting the G20 this year. And you may remember how the pandemic showed us how connected we all are when it comes to matters of health. The problem is the US seems to no longer believe in multilateralism. It's been pulling out of the World Health Organization. And of course, from the tone, from the tenor of comments coming out of the Trump administration at the moment, that I suspect there's more of this to come. Dr. Nicholas Crisp is the Deputy Director General in the National Health Department with responsibility for the NHI. But he's been one of the people hosting this event today. Dr. Crisp, good evening. I do appreciate the time. Thank you. I mean, if there was one lesson we learned from 2020, 2021, is that what is first found in Wuhan can lead to lockdowns in Cape Town. Now the US pulls out of the World Health Organization. Is there still an appetite from your meetings today by other nations for people to work together to act in a multilateral way?
Yeah, good evening, Stephen, and hello to the listeners. Yes, indeed. There's very much an appetite for people to work together. The United States is the next G20 president, and so they attend these meetings as well. And I guess we're all finding our way through this new order. But there's a lot of solidarity, a lot of agreement on what must happen in health systems around the world and how we should adjust to a new normal.
Were there sort of substantive conversation from the US, or were they just sort of being observed? And I realize you may not be able to tell us everything that went on in the meeting. I do get concerned slightly that the US may be appearing at these things in name only.
No, the U.S. representatives are present. They have an opportunity to speak like all others and contributed to the discussion. So, like every other country, there's quite a formal structure in the way in which these meetings take place. And each of the G20 countries, plus other invited countries, got an opportunity to make inputs, and they did so.
There's a huge amount going on at the moment around the funding of healthcare. I mean, we're having a big debate in our country, as you well know. And one of the big issues that we learned during the pandemic, and President Cyril Ramaphosa made a series of very important comments about this after the pandemic, was how basically the only way to keep the whole world as safe as possible is to ensure that the poorer countries have enough money to do it. I mean, without vaccines at a young age, for example, everybody, and without vaccines everywhere, everybody can actually be in some kind of danger. Do you think, with everything that's happening, do you think that those issues are getting enough attention from members of the G20? Do people realize how important this still is? And the only way we're going to know is if they still make money available for these programs around the world.
Well, look, I think there's a number of things. There were two big finance themes discussed in this particular meeting. The one was around individual protection to make sure that people don't get pushed into poverty or financial hardship because of spending on healthcare. And there are a whole lot of projects and developments that are taking place in countries all around the world. And one of this is an opportunity for us to share those kinds of experiences. So out-of-pocket payments are frowned upon these days, and everyone recognizes they should be publicly funded, and I emphasize publicly funded, health systems across the world if you want to protect people from not going into financial hardship. The second big area of discussion was around health financing mechanisms. So which countries have what experiences and what reform structures. And they are absolutely praising us for our doggedness about wanting to implement our national health insurance. It's pretty much the trend around the world to move to uncomplicated single-payer systems, do away with all the multi-payer systems which create layers of administration that just add costs and don't contribute to healthcare. There are obviously many details, and each country has got its own starting point and its own set of challenges. But listening to what others have done and sharing those experiences and getting encouragement was actually quite a fruitful discussion.
I mean, I can imagine a lot of people have very strong views on this, as you probably know better than us. The DA is still a big part of the coalition. There's a budget vote next week, Dr. Kirsten. I mean, we'll sort of see how that all plays out. But the fact that the coalition is as it is, where quite a few, it's not just the DA, but at least two of the parties oppose the NHI, does that worry you that it might not actually be implemented, despite the fact that the Act has been signed into law, despite the fact that the regulations have been promulgated?
Well, only some of the regulations have been promulgated. It's a stepwise process. It takes many years. We learned again this week countries take between 15 and 35 years to implement the national health insurance, and I'm no doubt ours is going to take a long time too. But what everybody was saying to us is you must make bold steps early on if you're going to implement reforms, and you definitely need to make those actions now. You can't wait 5, 10 and 20 years. Most countries that have implemented massive reforms in healthcare have done in times of severe hardships in their countries, either economic or post-war, but they've nonetheless done them. How ours pans out in our country and the starting point that we face is very different from every other country because of the inequity in our society and in our health system. So I've no doubt that there will be bumps along the way, but the regulations that have been published thus far for the NHI Act deal only with the governance, because it is the board and the advisory committees that are outlined in the Act that must now do the developing of the administrative and support structures. The actual shifting of budgets out of the current financing structures into the National Health Insurance Fund can't happen until there's an accounting authority and a governance to look after it. So we hope that in these regulations, people will be confident that there's much greater transparency and a lot more clarity than is in the outline of the enabling legislation.
Dr. Nicholas Crisper, really appreciate the time on The Money Show. Thank you. Deputy Director General for the NHI and the National Department of Health.
702. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
Well, the Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago, continuing to bang his drum for a lower inflation target this week, is speaking at the Reserve Bank, the SA Reserve Bank conference yesterday, saying leaving the inflation target band between 3 and 6% in place would end up costing government a lot of money. The National Treasury has said they're looking at lowering the inflation target, would mean interest rates would probably have to stay higher for longer to achieve that. Dr. Azar Jamin is the Director and Chief Economist at Econometrics. Azar, good evening. I mean, when the governor says keeping the inflation target where it is would cost government money, what does he mean? I presume this is about government debt and would probably cost us all money.
Effectively, that is correct, because what it implies is that interest rates would have to remain higher for longer than would otherwise have been the case, and so debt servicing costs would also tend to be much higher than would otherwise have been the case. Already in the past few months, we have seen long-term interest rates rising by almost 1%, which in turn translates into an increase in the government's debt servicing costs for the year of up to 20 billion rand or so. And that money can't be spent on more critical areas such as education, healthcare, policing and the like.
The problem, of course, is that if we were trying to try and lower the inflation target now, we would kind of need inflation at a consistent level of around the new target for a little bit before we officially did that. A few months ago, it looked like it could be the right time. Inflation was low. It looked like it would be low for some time. Has the moment passed, and partly because of the Trump administration and tariffs?
You may be correct, but we've been fairly successful even in the last few months with keeping inflation pretty much closer to the 3% lower end of the inflation target than allowing it to go up to 4.5%, which is effectively the inflation target currently, the midpoint of it. So I don't think the time has completely passed, and we could easily return to it. Fuel prices look as if they're going to come down again next week. So, there's a lot still going for us to be able to keep inflation to not much above 3% at present.
The one thing that we haven't really seen is we've had a little bit of debate around this issue, but not a huge amount of debate. And 25 years ago, when the current target was implemented, there was actual proper consultation. It might have been slightly easier then. COSATU and the Tripartite Alliance were almost a single entity. Things have changed dramatically now. If there was to be a period of public consultation, Dr. Jamin, I'm not sure how that would necessarily end. I can tell you that I think it would be quite messy, and I wonder if that may put things off for quite some time.
I think you're absolutely correct. And part of the problem, of course, is that, as you so rightly said, there are many parties within the ruling I better not say ruling, but within the ANC, that is the dominant party in the GNU, who are not in favor of reducing the inflation target and keep arguing that this would be bad for the trade unions and the working class, etc., they refuse to see the merits of ultimately having a lower inflation rate that actually benefits poorer people rather than actually harming them. Their vision is, let's grab what we can in terms of higher wages immediately, and things will be better for the working class that way, rather than looking a little further forward and perceiving that lower inflation is ultimately for the benefit of everyone, especially the poorer sections of society.
Dr. Azar Jamin, thanks very much indeed. Director Chief Economist at Econometrics.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Well, Zwelakhe Mguni, Chief Investment Officer at Benguela Global Fund Managers. Zwelakhe, good evening. As I talk to you now, gold is at $3,084.86 an ounce. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time the Money Show comes to an end in an hour and 14 minutes' time, it's at 3,100. And look at what it's done to shares on the JSE today.
Yeah, indeed, Stephen. The main thing is that we are seeing a lot of uncertainty in the economic realm and also in the geopolitics. I think we are seeing that there is these tariffs that are being put by Trump. I mean, today came out with the auto industry 25% tariff for vehicles not manufactured in the U.S. That has rattled markets across the world, particularly Europe, and we've seen the U.S. also coming under pressure as inflation seems to be sticking its neck out. So the gold price is well supported at these levels. It's a commodity that does well during times of uncertainty. So you're right. So we could see it even scale over 3,100 in the coming weeks.
It's one thing for the gold price to go up and for gold shares to move up slightly in response. When you see them moving up, 10%, for, I think it was Harmony, does that not suggest actually something slightly different? People are expecting the gold price to be high for actually a much longer time. They're buying shares in gold production, not in gold.
Absolutely. If you look at the long-term picture, I mean, the gold stocks did underperform the gold price, but we are at a point where these gold stocks are outperforming significantly. I mean, the likes of Harmony, one factor about them is that they're highly geared. So they've got high-cost mines. When the gold price increases, a very small increase above their break-even point has significant implications for their profitability. So we are seeing them going up 10% today. We also saw Goldfields going up 7%. So it is a strong move, but it's also fueled by 19 cents deterioration in the rand. So I think we're sitting at 1841 now. So the combination of a higher gold price and a weaker rand, if you translate it back to South Africa, it would give you much higher earnings. And you're absolutely right. The expectation is that it would stay like that for longer. Hence, we are seeing this price rallying.
And then at Capitec, Harry Fourie retiring at the age of 61, a very important part of the Capitec story.
Absolutely. He's done a phenomenal job. I think he took the Capitec business from 5 million clients to about 25 million clients. So he's grown the business. He's put the structure around the different divisions. He certainly has made a big contribution, but he's also one of the founding members. So it is marking a turning point in the history of the business. So we wish him well in his retirement.
I mean, South African banking has changed, and he's played a big role in that. And I suspect Capitec still has a long way to go.
Absolutely. What they did in the retail banking is certainly, if they can replicate it in the business banking, I think we're going to see a massive change in the banking landscape. They are competitive. They are systems focused, unlike the other banks that have been building on top of old systems that they've had since the 70s. So they've been very proactive in building systems that are very in today's technology. So they've done very well in that regard.
Zulaka Mguni, thanks very much indeed. Chief Investment Officer at Benguela Global Fund Managers. You with The Money Show, just gone 6:30.
The Money Show.
The Friday File.
The Friday File.
Well, I don't know if you have animals that live with you in your home. And in fact, the way we treat pets in South Africa, there are huge differences. I mean, many dogs live outside. They act really as guard dogs and sort of scrape by with whatever they get. And at the other end, you have people who let their dogs sleep with them on their beds. They call them fur babies. And I'm not just talking about puppies here. What has really changed in probably the last 5, maybe 10 years here and in South Africa, in South Africa and in many other places, is that the market for quality pet food has just exploded. People are probably spending more on food for their pets than they ever have in the past. Kirsten Viera is founding director of Pup Chef. Kirsten, good evening. Thanks so much for coming on.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
I know how important food is for me, but I like to think at my age, I take a little bit of time and I think about how I'm consuming my food and I keep all the carbohydrates for last because they're the best bits. How important is it for a dog? I mean, I want to say it matters as much, but my older dog and my puppy are both capable of devouring a full plate of food in under a minute.
So I think it's more along the lines of what is the quality of carbohydrate that your dogs are consuming. So, for example, a lot of the foods that are out there on the market, the commercial foods that are preserved, such as your pet kibbles and your cans, they contain maize, which is actually an unnecessary filler, and the quality is quite low when it comes to the nutritional quality. So I think that's really what you've got to look at when you are looking at the labels of your pet foods.
I mean, does it matter how much carbohydrate or what the carbohydrate actually is for animals?
Absolutely. It definitely matters. I think you need to get the ratios correct. You need to try keep down their glucose levels. High glucose levels, as in humans, lead to a lot of different diseases such as diabetes, pancreatitis, high blood pressure. So if you can keep the glucose levels down and you can ensure that your pets are getting more of a balanced meal, so a little bit of carbs, a bit more of your proteins, some veggies are also very important. It's more about creating a balance. The same as within humans, we need more of a balanced diet. And I think it's really important to strive for that within our pets too.
I mean, so with humans, you would have a plate, you'd have several items on it. You'd have protein, a carbohydrate, a vegetable, maybe a salad or something. And that's how you'd balance it out. With dogs, the trick is that you've really got to put it all together in one kind of pellet. That can't be very easy to do. And if you don't do it like that, if you try and I know people who've done this, will feed a dog a kind of variety. The moment you leave it out for an hour, you're going to have to throw that food away. You need to do it in a pellet so that it can sort of stay fresh. So putting all of those food groups in the right mixture in one pellet can't be easy.
It's very difficult. You do definitely need really, really advanced pet nutritionists and technologists who formulate these kinds of recipes. And then the trick is obviously, how do you make that shelf sustainable? So what a lot of these commercial foods do is they put a lot of preservatives and dyes in their foods in order to preserve their shelf life so that it can sit on the shelf for probably a year or so. So if you kind of weigh that up and you think to yourself, is it worth feeding my dog something that's got all these preservatives in, which creates inflammation and disease? Or is it better to rather feed them freshly cooked food? So basically what Pup Chef does is we feed human grade cooked food. If you can think your convenient meals that you would get that are simply just cooked and frozen, that is exactly what we do. We strive to create a balanced meal, and we strive to make sure that it's not overcooked and that everything has no preservatives at all. And that's pretty much what our ethos is. And we've seen phenomenal results in all of the dogs that basically have eaten our food. They've transformed from dogs who have had ailments such as arthritis and diabetes and have, I don't want to say been cured, but the results have been dramatic, and it's quite incredible how we've been able to help dogs thrive in so many ways. So I think it's really important to try and make sure that your dogs have less preserved food, if that makes sense.
I mean, dogs wouldn't get cooked food in the wild. Is it right to give them cooked food?
So dogs have been domesticated for 10,000 years. They're very different and have evolved from their wolves. So I think they're more scavengers, and they have been obviously domesticated with humans, and they've eaten our scraps for 10,000 years. So when it comes to eliminating parasites, I think that's a very, very important process to take into account. I understand that some people do advocate for raw, and I think it definitely has its place. I definitely advocate for cooked food. We have had many scary stories where dogs have had salmonella and food poisoning and parasites, and they've literally almost been on their deathbed. The clients have then come to us, and we've managed to help nurse their dog back. So I think it's very important to understand the balance of how much raw versus cooked food that you do feed your dog.
You spoke about some of the ailments, some of the problems dogs have that you can help with diet. I mean, I know a lot of dogs, I suppose especially on the high felt, suffer from eczema, and their skin gets very itchy, and so what they do is they keep scratching it, and then they draw blood and they keep going, and it can make it very bad. I mean, does food play a big role in that?
Absolutely. The quality of food plays a massive role in the quality of the skin, the quality of the fur that the dog does have. Oils are also something that are quite important to supplement. We actually have a salmon oil, it's Norwegian salmon oil, and that omega-3 helps and assists all kinds of skin allergies and ailments. A lot of dogs suffer with, like you say, eczema and dry skin, and they end up almost like scratching until they bleed. So once you start applying this on their food, you'll see like an incredible difference with the quality of their fur and skin.
You actually got involved in this because your dogs weren't very well.
That's correct. So it started off with my dog Kenzo and my dog Seska. They were Boston Terriers. They have since passed. I managed to at least extend my dog's life by 9 years, which is quite phenomenal. I love my dogs dearly. I'm an incredible dog lover. That's where it all starts from. And I made sure that I tried to speak to a lot of nutritionists, holistic healers, naturopaths, and vets to help me find and source the correct ingredients to make the right meals for my dogs. I then obviously saw the results, and they turned into different dogs. And the vet was quite taken back, in fact. And my friends were taken back, and I started cooking for my friends, and I started cooking for their friends. And all of a sudden, I had a business on my hands, which was quite incredible. This was a very organic thing that came from the heart. So it's quite beautiful to see how it's grown over the years.
It's interesting how, I think you're the third business this week we've spoken to in a way that sort of developed like that. Kirsten, there's lots of competition in this space. There are lots of sort of niche people filling different niches in this market. Do you have to do something quite different to actually be seen, to be visible, to be noticed? And vets, where a lot of these dog foods are sold, and some of the pet stores have kind of quite long-running agreements with some producers. It may not be easy to get into all the pet food stores you'd want to.
This has definitely been quite a difficult task since I have been running the business. A lot, as you say, a lot of the vets do have their partnerships with the dog foods that have been around for many, many years. It is a very, very competitive sphere. It's a difficult market to enter for sure. And I think the most important thing that we've done is we've tried to stay true to who we are as a company. We've tried to, as much as we can, market business to business and business to customer. We found that marketing more directly to the consumer has been a lot more beneficial for us. And it's kind of morphed our strategy as we've gone along. And a lot of our consumers have actually gotten us into their vets, which has been quite wonderful. So we've stayed true to who we are. We stayed true to our strategy and our philosophy. And I think it's really helped in being pure that people have noticed the difference between what we do and maybe what other companies that are similar do. And I think that's maybe the important thing. I think remaining very true to your ethos has been really beneficial for us.
How difficult is pricing in this market? Because there is a limit to how many people are going to spend, or how many people are going to spend how much on a dog, on food, especially when there's so much competition.
Absolutely. And especially with the current inflation, I think everyone has been feeling their pockets hurt a little bit, especially with their own food. And obviously, ingredients and food is linked directly to what we have to charge. So it is really, really difficult to place ourselves in the market in terms of price. It's highly competitive because we use fresh ingredients and we obviously have massive freezing capacity. There's a lot of economic strain that we feel when we have to change our pricing accordingly. However, we do try our best to create very, very good value for what we have. And we have actually had clients come to us saying to us, look, we were on a very fancy pellet brand and actually your food has turned out a lot cheaper. So we've saved X amount of rands in the last month and it's been phenomenal for us. So that's great. We really, really try create the best value that we can for our customer.
I have to ask this question quite bluntly, Kirsten. Do you believe people really notice the difference in their animals when they feed them this kind of food rather than the cheaper stuff? Are you really going to notice a big difference?
100%. I believe that with everything. We have had the most phenomenal results and for example, we had a client recently that said to us, oh my gosh, since I've been on your food, which has literally been a week, I've seen my dog have so much more energy. You can see the color in their eyes returning. You can see the difference in their coats. They don't sleep all day. They actually have this liveliness to them. And I think that is definitely testament to what nutrients can do for your dog. If you don't want your dog to be in the vet a lot, I would really, really suggest looking at a good quality food. It really makes a difference to their behavior. It makes a difference to the quality of their skin, and it makes a difference to their quality of life and your pocket. You don't have to be in the vet all the time.
Kirsten, thank you very much indeed. Kirsten Viera is the founding director of Pup Chef. Well, I don't know which way you go when it comes to animals. I know for plenty of people, once you start feeding a dog a certain quality of food, you never really go back. It just is what it is. It's part of sort of daily life. It tells you how important pets are to some families in South Africa. And of course, by the same token, there are plenty of dogs that don't get that care for various reasons. Your thoughts this evening. It's 6 minutes now to 7 o'clock.
The Money Show.
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
And DSTV channel 856.
Time now for the Friday Biz Blitz. You know how it works. We ask you a question. If you get it right, we move on to the next question. If we get it wrong, we move on to the next caller. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. Very easy question to start you tonight. MTN has been replaced by which bank as the primary sponsor of the Springboks? The Springboks, who is now their primary sponsor, taking over from MTN. And I'll give you a hint. It's a big bank. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. Which bank is the main sponsor of the Springboks?
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes, brought to you by Absa CIB, proud sponsor of the Bonds, Loans and ESG Africa 2025 conference from the 25th to the 26th of March at the Cape Town International Convention Centre. First question on the Friday Biz Blitz this evening. MTN's been replaced by which bank as the primary sponsor of the Springboks? 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. Let's start in Northcliffe in Johannesburg. Boy, good evening.
Hi, it's FNB.
It is FNB, boy. Congratulations. You clearly knew off the top of your head. You didn't have to think about it for a second. Okay.
Yeah, I heard on the news yesterday.
Indeed. Okay, boy, second question. Name the company with the most expensive share on the JSE. Which company's shares are the most expensive on the JSE? It's a company we talk about all the time. Come on, boy. You're going to kick yourself.
Capitec?
It's not Capitec. They're the second highest, okay? So
All right.
we're looking for the
All right.
only one that's more expensive than Capitec.
All right.
Okay. Boy, thank you. Bethuel. Bethuel in Kempton Park, also in Joburg. Bethuel, hi.
Hi.
Which is the most expensive share on the JSE?
No.
Come on, Bethuel. You will kick yourself. It's a company we talk about all the time.
Paulos.
No, come on.
No.
I'll give you a hint. It's partly because of their relationship with China.
Well, I have no idea.
Oh, Bethuel. I'm sorry, man. Okay. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. Which company has the most expensive share on the JSE? And it is, once you think about it for just a second, you'll be able to work it out very quickly. We've also got questions around G20. We've got questions as well about a particular signaling app, a particular messaging app, which found itself in the news very much this week. But first, we need to know which company has the most expensive share on the JSE. We've got to get past that before we go anywhere else. Let's go to Gavin in the City Bowl in Cape Town. Gavin, hi.
Hi. Is it Naspers?
It is Naspers. Of course it's Naspers, Gavin, yes. Gavin, yes. Okay, next question. G20 is stepping down as the CEO of which bank?
Capitec, age 61, I think.
Indeed.
Yeah.
You've been listening to your business bulletins today, Gavin. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a tour guide. I spend my life in the car.
In Cape Town, lucky you. Okay, which messaging app, which was co-founded by a cryptographer, became the go-to for privacy lovers, cabinet members in the Trump administration, and can self-destruct messages?
The Telegram.
No, Gavin. I'm sorry, Gavin. You did so well. David, come on, help me out here.
Signal?
It is Signal, yes. And obviously it's been in the news a lot this week for various reasons. Okay, last question for you. Mark Carney is the Prime Minister of which North American country?
If you can come again, I think I know the answer, but you can come again with the question.
Mark Carney is the Prime Minister of which North American country?
I'm going to guess Canada.
It is indeed Canada, David. Congratulations. Yes. David, you are the winner of the Friday Biz Blitz. You're with the Money Show, 7 o'clock.